So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. What I'm going to talk about today is two of my favorite topics, developing on Azure and using Visual Studio Code. A lot of people know about Visual Studio and the great tools that we have in VS for doing all kinds of things on Azure, but not a lot of people know about the various extensions that exist on VS Code. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got started with that, how I built some stuff up, and probably tell you at least what I understand the future looks like when it comes to VS Code. And then obviously we're going to have a couple of demos, and if time exists, I'll probably have one little surprise demo that I just worked on today. So hopefully it'll work. If it won't work, I'll have to bring Sam up on stage because he knows more about IoT than me. All right, so let me go ahead and talk about our agenda today. First thing I want to kind of go through is what we're going to be talking about for the next hour, just so you have kind of a level set. And if you're not interested, you can get up and leave or change the channel for those of you online. Quick agenda. First, we're going to talk about how I began working on Azure and VS Code and kind of what the other teams are doing to build out extensions. Then I'm going to tell you how you can acquire those extensions and how you can actually make use of them yourself. That comes up in the third section on using them. And then in the fourth section, we're going to talk about how you yourself could actually extend VS Code to add functionality if you're an Azure developer. You just did a great talk on Service Bus and Service Fabric and all that stuff. If you wanted to build some tools out, there are some conventions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what those conventions are. So if you wanted to start partying on VS Code extension development yourself, you know how to get started. Speaking of getting started, this is what it was like about a year ago. I had this idea. I used to work on the Azure SDK team. Thank you, Azure SDK team and Hunter, for that opportunity. And one of the things that I did there was work with Glenn Block to understand how to do the Nodejs SDK. I wasn't very involved in Node at the time, but when I was in Docs, I was actually building the reference documentation for the Nodejs SDK. I didn't know Node, and I didn't know the SDK, and I didn't know how to code in Visual Studio Extension development land. So I literally was like this guy, completely walking alone, didn't really know how to do anything, and all I had were the docs. So at the time I was working in the docs, and my reason for doing this was to make sure that I didn't feel like this. So if I started to use these docs and I wanted to make it better, this way I kind of knew how to use the SDK better. But just kind of got started, and there wasn't much out there, and pretty much snowballed after that. So what we're going to talk about is the history and how these tools have evolved, and talk about some of the awesome people that helped me kind of get it going, and then talk about some of the even more awesome people who are going to push it into the future. All right, here's the timeline. Ironically, this timeline only goes back to October 2016. October 15th, I did my first commit. So I did the first commit of the Azure tools for VS Code, and I did like a quick little release of some of the basic features, knowing that before I got to V1, I had a lot of features that I wanted to add, ARM support, et cetera, et cetera. A friend of mine in Atlanta, US, Ian Philpott, he actually did a contribution. He got really excited about it and goes, hey, I want to add something to this. So Ian contributed the storage functionality, which I probably won't do a demo of today, but effectively it gives you the ability to create storage accounts and then get the storage accounts connection string so you can put it into a config file, all from within VS Code. And then, of course, we took a look at the code at that state and we went, oh, this is really bad. So we started refactoring. So just like every good developer, within 2 weeks of starting the project, we went ahead and started refactoring it. You guys ever do that? Anybody ever do that? Never. Come on, be honest. Raise your hand. More people, come on. You refactor from day one, don't you? Okay, I know Daryl does. All right. By the way, I'm going to pick on Daryl the whole talk. So we're friends. All right, so in January, I did a 1.0 release, and I had a meeting with Chris Diaz and some of the folks from the awesome VS Code dev team. And one of the things we talked about was how we should create an extension pack. So Chris actually went out, made an extension pack, and literally the extension has no functionality. All it has is a list of dependencies. My tool was one of the dependencies. Another tool called the ARM tools, which give you IntelliSense completion when you're working on resource manager templates like Magnus talked about earlier. So we basically bundled all those into an extension pack, and it just sucks everything down. It's kind of like when you have a NuGet that doesn't have any code in it, it just pulls in other NuGets. Anybody ever do that? My hand's up because I've done that. It's kind of a slick way of doing things. Then we had a lot of meetings. See here? Whole lot of meetings from January to July. What about this? What about this? How do we want to do this? How do you want to make it conventional? Do we want to build one big extension? Never a good idea. or a bunch of little extensions? Always a good idea. If we build a bunch of little extensions, who's going to own them? Always a question mark. In the meantime, a buddy of mine who's actually on stage right now with Hanselman, Christos Matskas, he got really excited as well. And he said, I want to make some commits. So he added Key Vault support, he added batch support, and at that point I kind of just kicked my feet up and let him go. You know, he started adding a bunch of functionality, and we sort of started departing on things. I released a blog post in January talking about how I'd gotten my MVP functionality done. The last piece of the MVP functionality I wanted to add was support for RM templates. We got all that in. And then sometime around April, John Papa and the Cloud Developer Advocacy team that do a lot of stuff in Node and Cosmos DB, they started releasing function tools, and now they've got a bunch of other small extensions they're putting out that do a lot of different things. And then all of a sudden in September, well, in July this year, the Azure SDK team, my old team, specifically Matt Hernandez, the guy who kind of leads the Nodejs SDK effort, he and Chris Diaz got together and they kind of formed a partnership between the Azure SDK team and the VS Code team. It's really awesome when the teams work together at Microsoft. Great things happen. And you can see that within 2 months, they've actually put out some new extensions. Why do I show you all this? Because there's probably going to be a couple of weird things that happen during this talk. This is the first time I've given this particular version of this talk, because Magnus asked me to do this talk, and I thought, well, I'm going to show my extension off again. And then all of a sudden, all these extensions came out. So I'm showing you stuff for the first time. So it's kind of fun. But what you'll see here is that we're moving into 2018, and we have a bunch of ideas, and a lot of other teams are asking for extensions that will be loading up in VS Code. How many VS Code users do I have in the room? This is a legitimate question. See, every hand in the room pretty much goes up. If you're a dev, you're using VS Code. How many of you just love the product? Okay. Those of you who didn't put your hands up the second time, let's talk afterwards. Love to hear your opinions on why. At the same time, this awesome guy, Jonathan Carter, was doing some side projects. He was working on another VS Code extension called AZJS. And what AZJS was going to be able to do was kind of targeting Node developers. Like if you were a main stack dev, he kind of had a template for it, yada, yada. And he was also working on this great NPM package called AZ Login, which makes logging into Azure through Node really, really easy. Well, what ended up happening was we really took a look at that type of functionality, and we said, we want to build extensions on top of the stuff that Jonathan was doing, because if we build an extension to make it easy for you to log into your Azure subscription, other people who want to build extensions can do that. And quite frankly, that's one of the most difficult things. Just logging in is hard because we want it to be secure. So it is. So let's take a look at what's out there today. Let's take a quick look at the extensions that are out there, and then we're going to dive in and do demos. Okay? Current extensions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a list of services that are in Azure, or resource types that are in Azure, and then we're going to look at the extensions that exist to do that. The idea is, like, I've got app service at the top. Alphabetically speaking, it makes sense. Plus, it's kind of where I do a lot of my work. I really like to do things in app service. I'm a web guy, so it's fun. But we've got the app service tools, which were just released about 2-3 weeks ago, and then the functions tools that I mentioned earlier that John Papa's team has been putting out. On top of that, we've got a couple of data things, a couple data extensions like SQL Server. Cosmos DB extension came out the same day that the app service tools came out. There were already HD Insight and Storage Explorer tools that existed within VS Code. So you've got app service and data is already in there. Containers. There's a great Docker extension worked on by some folks at Microsoft. At Connect, I believe last year or the year before, Chris Diaz gave a great presentation on how to do Docker from within VS Code. Highly recommend his presentation. I won't be doing that today. I'm kind of a Docker noob, so I don't want to embarrass myself on stage trying to do Docker and failing. If you're an IaaS guy, there's actually a virtual machine explorer, so you can kind of iterate through your VMs in Azure. And then there's kind of a set of general extensions like mine. The Azure tools for VS Code, very obliquely named because I didn't know what I was going to put in it. And then there's also some RM tools. The Azure tools actually take a dependency on the RM tools. The RM tools really give you like color coding, IntelliSense capability. They make writing resource manager templates a lot easier. Same team that works on the RM tools for VS Code worked on the RM tools for Visual Studio. Kind of makes sense. IoT, there's an IoT toolkit that kind of rolls in a couple of different extensions. And recently they put out an Event Hubs Explorer. So if you're doing IoT to Event Hubs, you can actually look at your Event Hubs from within VS Code. And then there's a core. And the core at this point is really this Azure account extension. And the idea behind the Azure account is make it easy for extension developers to log into Azure, take that token, take those credentials, and then pump it through their extension to be able to do other stuff. I just want to point out that all those exist. I'm going to highlight, love this, I'm going to highlight the app service area today. I'm going to talk a little bit about SQL Server and Cosmos DB. I'm also going to talk about these guys, the RM tools and the Azure tools for VS Code. This is my surprise demo. I'm going to do something with the IoT toolkit, and then we'll talk a little bit about Azure account during the conventions section. Cool. Moving right along. So let's party. Let's see what we can do. So the first demo is create and deploy a simple Node.js app service. So I asked some of my lovely colleagues in the front and second row whether or not they thought it'd be a good idea for me to start from scratch, meaning an empty directory, or for me to start after I pull down and create a template. They said go for the end-to-end. So you can blame Magnus for this. Actually, it was him too. So, all right, so I'm gonna go in I've got a source folder, CD CloudBurst, where am I again? CD01, there we go. I got nothing in there. So what I wanna do now is just do Yo Express. And I've just got the Yeoman guy on my machine. And I'm going to use Yo to, dang it, that's not working. Oh, that's bad. I'm going to close this guy out real quick. Okay, weird. I had Zoom set up. There we go. So I'm going to do Yo Express because I want to create like a basic Express app. A good colleague of mine, Burke Holland, just did like a 2-minute video on deploying a, I don't want to do that. Sorry, folks. On using this tool to pump out a Express app to Azure. So if you don't get a lot out of this first demo, you can actually watch Burke Holland's video on this. And his whole team is doing a bunch of stuff. Now I'm just accepting all the defaults in this because I'm not going to do anything complex until later. And what will happen now is it'll go ahead and do the npm install. Okay, so I'm going to get everything that I need for a basic Express app. Sorry about that. So I want to go ahead and do zoom back out again after this guy is built. Dang it, that's weird. Taking a while. Oh, I went too far. There we go. Let's go right down to the bottom. I'll do a clear screen here, and then I'm just going to do a code dot. That's going to open up code in this particular directory. Now, what you'll see is that down here you'll see that it's logging me in. Now, when I first built my extension, I didn't want to worry too much about having to remember somebody's login credentials. So actually, my tool, you would have to log in every single time. Now you'll see that I'm already logged into my Azure subscription down here. And if I were to go over so that you could see this window, now what I want to show you is we've got the open editors and then all the different tabs here in VS Code. And what we've kind of stuck with is a convention where we want to throw each individual service type into its own little segment, okay? So one of the pieces of guidance, if you want to start building these yourself, is be cognizant of these sections starting to pile up. We always want VS Code to be a fast product. So if you start writing these extensions, just start thinking maybe you should only add one of these at a time. Just be respectful of your fellow devs. So what you'll see that I'm doing now is I'm actually expanding all of this stuff right here, and what I'm going to do now is actually hit this plus sign. And what I want to do is I just want to create a brand new app service. So it's going to ask me a couple questions. The first one is going to be which subscription I have. The second one is going to be where do I want to put it. I want to put it in the CloudBurst guy. I don't have an app service plan, so I want to create one. Now when I do this, one thing that I want to point out is that this set of extensions, or this first set of extensions, especially the app service one, sort of targets the Node.js dev. So what that means is when I create my app service plan, the app service plan is going to be a Linux app service plan. So I just want to point that out because we're going to be kind of targeting the Node guy. And we know that they like Linux. So it's going to ask me what I want to call it. I'll just call this guy CloudBurst Express app. And I'll hit enter. And then I'm going to have to pick what SKU size I want. I'll go ahead and go with basic. And now I'll say CloudBurst Express web app. There we go. And it's going to ask me which runtime I want. We were talking about this in the hallway. Again, it's going to kind of presume that I want a Node app here. One piece of advice I would give the people who wrote this, wink, wink, or I'll send you a PR, is a question before this that says, do you want a Windows or a Linux? Anybody think that's a good idea? Okay, cool. Note, all hands went up. Okay. All right, so what will happen now is we're going to start to, it's going to go out to the Fabric and it's going to create my resource group if it doesn't exist. Mine does. It's going to create my Linux app service plan. It's going to create my web app, and everything's going to be ready to go. Once that's done, I'm going to want to deploy my brand new Express app out to Azure. So what they've done with this extension is, has anybody ever heard of Kudu, the Kudu deployment API? Okay, well, Kudu is not just like this fancy thing that runs in Azure and like makes life easy for you. It also has an HTTP API. So you can throw it a zip file, and it will unzip everything in that file and drop it down into your app service. So you see that I've already created this stuff, and look at this. This is like a wonderful feature. What the guys have done is after this resource has been created, they actually write an AZ CLI script for me and drop it into the window. So if I want to replicate this in another resource group, like maybe have like a staging and production environment, I can just run this script and change the variables. Pretty handy, right? We'll get back into the AZ CLI later on, because we're going to talk about the extension specific for AZ CLI users. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this guy down, and we'll use it later. But you'll see here that I've got my Express app right here. Now what I'll do, close this guy, is I'm going to go in and I want to expand my CloudBurst Express web app. I'm going to right-click it, and what you'll see is I have a nice feature here, deploy zip package to web app. I'll click that, and now I'll go over here, and you'll see that what's happening is it's actually going to take that entire folder that I've got open in VS Code right now. It's going to zip the whole thing up. Then it's going to use the Kudu HTTP API to throw that zip up to Azure. And once Kudu gets it, it's going to unzip it. It's going to look at my package.json file, figure out which, if any, NPM packages my app is using, install all of them, and then deploy my code. You like that? All from within VS Code. So you notice I haven't even left VS Code. I didn't go to the portal. I haven't been to the portal yet. Okay? Go ahead and do this. Now, while that's lighting up, one thing I'm going to talk about real quick is Cosmos DB. Okay, now Cosmos DB is a really great way for you to use schemaless dynamic data store. It's great because you can move it all around the world. You can replicate your data to multiple environments easily. You can use, if you're a main stack developer, any main stack guys in the room, just out of curiosity? Or do you work with any main stack guys? Is your brother-in-law a main stack dev? Anyone? Do you know any main? Okay. Anybody do Node? No Node devs? Okay, cool. So I just want to kind of point out that what we could, one of the big things that's happening in the community right now is people are using functions in Cosmos DB together. It's like a serverless, schemaless sort of approach to doing things. I'm a big fan of the Graph API. Anybody ever use the Graph API? You can do a lot of dynamic stuff with Graph APIs. I'm not going to go too deep into what you can do with Cosmos DB today, but I will show you how you can party on it from within here. I'm just going to do this while that's deploying so we save time and multitask. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. John Papa, I want to show you his URL instead of my own because I've got a fork of it. John Papa has actually created a really great kind of getting started tutorial, if anybody wants to photograph the URL and use it later, on how to use Node.js app service and Cosmos DB together to do things so that you have like a schemaless Graph API fronted by a Node.js backend. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull his code down and show you kind of how to use some of this stuff together and how you can do it all directly from within VS Code. Now I have my own fork of it specific to this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this out. I'm going to CD out here, CD into my O3 demo, and just do a git clone. Pass this guy in. And while that's deploying, while it's coming down, I'm going to look here. And you'll see that my deployment has completed. Everything's already been pulled down. Now I'm going to right-click my web app right here. And this is super convenient. They've given you this ability to open the thing in the portal so you don't have to go to the portal and go through blade after blade after blade after blade after blade, yada, yada, or after blade. Or you can just click Browse Website. So you don't even have to know their own URL. So I'll go ahead and click Browse Website right now. See that what that's going to do is it's going to open up my newly deployed Node.js Express application in the browser. There will be a moment of spin up time. I apologize. And there you go. So you've already deployed a Node.js app. Pretty cool, huh? All right. So moving right along, let's see if I've pulled down John's code yet. Yes, I have. And I'm going to close this code window. I'll be closing and opening code quite a bit today. So I'm going to cd into his directory here, do a quick clear string, and then I'm going to do an npmi just to start pulling everything down. Before I do that, what I want to talk about is how you can actually create a brand new Cosmos DB database. Now, Cosmos DB databases take a couple of seconds to create, so I'm not going to create a Cosmos DB database that I'm going to party on from within this demo. I've already got one created that we're going to party on instead. But I will go ahead and create a second one that I'll delete later, just so you see how to do it. Okay? It's really, really, really hard. They've made it incredibly difficult. I go into VS Code, and you remember how I had an app service area? Well, I've got a Cosmos DB area right here as well. Okay, and if I let it load all of those that I have, you'll see that I've already got one pre-created. Let me do a refresh. Excuse me? Yeah, you can do MongoDB. You're already jumping ahead. What'd you say, heretic?
No.
Okay. What he's alluding to is that, I'll go ahead and do this. So it's going to ask me for my subscription. I'm going to go ahead and select it. And one thing you'll see here, I just want to point this out. You guys remember when I did this for the app service, the thing that dropped down was 2 lines, it was kind of big? And if you look at it now, it's not. That's a theme for this presentation. We'll get back to that later. It's called convention. Okay? Sometimes things take a little while to become conventional. A good way to put it. So it's going to say, where do you want to put it? I want to put it in CloudBurst, and I'm going to call it heretic. And now it should ask me another question. What do I want? Now, I would use graph here. No offense, MongoDB guys. No offense, Beanstalk. I'm just more of a graph guy. But for the purpose of this time, I want to go ahead and create a MongoDB. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. I'm going to put it in North Europe. That's kind of where we are. Now it's going to go out and it's going to go ahead and start creating that MongoDB database directly in Azure. Pretty hard, huh? Okay. Why did I want to create a MongoDB one? Well, I'm going to be building a Node.js app. And what the Cosmos DB team has done, which I think is brilliant, and I've heard your opinion already, is that you can actually use a MongoDB provider. So if you're a Node developer who's using MongoDB and you decide you want to move your stuff to Azure, you don't really have to change any of your code. All you have to do is move your data into Cosmos DB, and you can use the Mongo and Mongo's client to actually communicate back and forth with it. It's pretty cool. What that means is that all your Node friends can come to Azure without really having to change a whole bunch of their code. And in fact, John Papa's got a couple of video demos of how he does this stuff. And when he walks through it, he's using Mongoose client and MongoDB for everything. Pretty awesome. So they can actually bring their stack, which is nice. Now that I've got that created, I'm going to want to go ahead and deploy a Cosmos DB-backed Node.js app service up to Azure. So I've already pulled down John's code because I couldn't write it myself. Believe me, he's much better at this kind of thing than I am. I'm more of a, that was not good. I said Node, no, I meant code. All right, so the first thing I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my app service blade here for a minute. There's going to be a couple of small code changes we're going to make. Nothing intimidating. Even Daryl could do it. No, I did call it a blade. It's kind of funny, huh? What should I call it? A panel? I'm kind of curious. I did call it a blade, though. Thank you for noticing. All right, so I've gone ahead and done this again. I've gone ahead and clicked the Add button. Now, see here, when we did the Cosmos DB one, it was kind of a skinny thing, and now it's not. So it's going to ask me where I want to put it. I want to put it in CloudBurst. Now, I'm going to go ahead and reuse the previous app service plan that I created. So I'll go ahead and click this guy, and I'll call this CloudBurst Cosmos DB sample. Hit enter. And again, it's going to ask me what stack I want. I'm going to go ahead and use Node 8.1. I'll pull this down, and you'll see that it's going ahead and it's actually creating everything. Now, since I've got a Cosmos DB already in my Azure subscription, I'm going to go right over here and right-click to expand this guy, this blade. And after I do, there's no journeys. So you'll see that if I click the database, I've also got open in portal. So I can actually do the same thing as before. I can go ahead and click that and get right to the portal. This is a feature that I actually built into my original extension, but it was all through the command palette, so it was a little bit harder to use. Okay, it was a lot harder to use. But you see I've already got my guy open up right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my, I've got credit remaining, which is good. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy out the name, CloudBurst, and I'm going to go into this environment folder. I can find the environment folder, server, environment, and I'm going to rename this, and I'll just call it environment.js. And it says, you know, I need your information. So the name is going to be the one that I just created. And the way you would actually be able to connect to it, if I go to my, where is it? Where is it? Where are the keys? Data Explorer? No, not there. Not there. Dang it. Where are the keys? Is it connection string? Yeah, it's connection string. Thank you. I'll copy out the port and put the port right here. And then I will copy out my password. I don't know why they call it password, but whatever. I'll paste that guy right here. And now, since this is a Angular app, now again, it's already generated my CLI script for me here. Since this is an Angular app, I'm going to have to do like a pre-build, because Angular uses TypeScript and I only want to get the JS files and yada, 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 and I barely know what I'm talking about. I've just heard John present it. So you'll see that I don't have a dist folder up here. Now it's going to seem weird, okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my app locally, and then I'm going to open up another instance of VS Code in that publish folder. Because I don't want to publish everything. I don't want to publish all my source code, because a lot of it's going to get built for me. That's going to make a little bit more sense. How many of you would consider yourselves to be .NET people more than you are Node people? Okay, me too. It'll make a little bit more sense in the next demo when we do an ASP.NET version of this. All right, so I'll flip over to my terminal here, which is handy. Apologize for it being tiny. I'll go ahead and do an ng build. And what that will do is it will go ahead and build all the stuff for me and drop it into a publish folder for all intents and purposes. And then I would actually deploy only that publish folder. I wouldn't deploy all the source code. In some Angular, anybody use AngularJS in here? Or was that, as I call it, Angular TS? This is TypeScript mostly. If you're an Angular guy or lady, one of the things that you've noticed in the past is that you write everything in TypeScript, you generate your JavaScript, you publish your JavaScript, you don't publish your TypeScript. Okay, so that's what that ng build is all about. So you'll see that it's already finished. And now what I'll do is, still within code, I'll cd into the dist folder, and then gets really meta. From within code, I'm going to type code dot and open another instance. Just amazing. Sorry. I just think it's funny. All right, now remember, I've already got that app service created. So I'm in a subfolder of my overall site, because I only need to publish that dist folder. Come on. Is it loading? There. There it goes. All right, I'll right-click this guy again, my blade. So you see I've got my Cosmos DB sample. I'll right-click this guy, deploy the zip to the web app. Now I wanted to show you that because if you're doing any Angular development, or and you'll see in a minute, any ASP.NET Core 2 development, you're going to want to only publish a subset of your source code. You only publish your distribution folder. Okay? That's going to go ahead and get up. While that's publishing, one thing I want to do is flip over to the deck, and I want to show you that our next guy is going to be creating and deploying an ASP.NET Core 2.0 app. Now, this one's kind of important to me. I worked on the ASP.NET team for a little while. Worked with Hunter to do his demos and whatnot. ASP.NET's something near and dear to my heart, as I'm sure it is to everybody else in here. I'll live and breathe ASP.NET forever. But with ASP.NET Core, there come a lot of new ways to do things, some of which are not exactly as intuitive as they have been in the past, especially for those of us doing something crazy like writing ASP.NET on a Mac. Okay, that's like kind of a new world for a lot of folks. So see if this guy's uploading now. So what I'll do now is I want to back out of this folder, cd into 04. Let me cd 04, ASP.NET, and I'll do a clear screen and then a list. And for anybody who's like, did he just do his CLS and bash? Yes. Why? Habit. Deal with it. I can't type clear. It's too hard. I'm sorry. I know that's a little, it's like PowerShell inside of here. So what I'll do now is I'll do .NET new, and I'm kind of a big fan of this new Razor page thing. All right, so I'm going to do a .NET new Razor. If you're more of an MVC person, you could do .NET new MVC and create like a traditional MVC style project. But I'm more into the Razor page stuff. So I'm going ahead and click this, and it's going to go ahead and create a brand new Razor app for me inside of the folder. And I'm pretty much ready to party at this point. This guy's already deployed. Now I'll right click this guy, do browse website, and what we should see is kind of a little hero form, almost like a to-do list, but Papa's example uses heroes and comic book type themes, which I think is great. Keep it up, John. When this thing loads up, I can actually add and remove data from a Cosmos DB database without having to do a whole bunch of work. So you'll see I've got add new hero right here. I'll go ahead and click add new hero. We'll say number 1 because he is number 1, and his saying is cough cough this week. I'll go ahead and click save, and that should go back to my Cosmos DB database. And I may have a bug. Apologies.
John has a bug. You're fine.
Really? I might not have wired it up right. Okay, it's not going to wire up. Apologies. I'll do 1. Magnus. Who? Okay. Maybe I didn't wire it up. I probably missed a wire up. But you get the idea? It worked right there 20 minutes ago. Demo bug. First one. Probably won't be the last. Okay, so you get the idea though. You can basically, deploy your Node.js apps directly out. But I know this is the part everybody really cares about, right? This is the part that matters when we get into .NET. So I want to do it really quickly, open up code here. And we'll see that we've got our entire ASP.NET app, everything that I would need. Now I'm not going to create a new app from within here. And the reason I'm not is it's going to create a Linux. Remember, like we talked about earlier, it will actually create a Linux hosting plan for me. If I wanted to deploy an ASP.NET Core app to a Linux app service, I could do that, but the build would be different. I would just have to embed the assembly. At least I think that's what I would have to do. I haven't tried it too much yet. But I've already got one that I've created. I'll go ahead and add my assets to this project so VS Code can compile it. I've already pre-created a app service that's got a Windows hosting plan. I've created that guy right here, CloudBurst ASP.NET Core app, so you see that I've already got it. Now, I'm not going to do a deploy zip package to a web app because I haven't compiled my app and built it and put it into a published folder. So I'm going to have to do kind of the same trick that I did before with the NG. Want to kind of drive this point home, okay? So I'll flip back out, and I'm going to do a .NET publish. And I'm going to say output folder. I'm going to do published. And if you watch over here, you can't see what I'm doing, but if you watch kind of in this area, what you'll see is that a published folder will show up in my directory tree as soon as I do this. Now, what I would really like, wink wink to the devs, is to be able to right-click a folder inside of my entire root and have that deploy hanging off of that folder. I think that would be more convenient than having to open up a new instance of code. I know you guys are just getting started. Makes sense. All right. So I'll do CD into publish here, and then I'll do code one more time. And this will open up only my publish folder, and you can see that I've got my PDBs, my DLLs, a couple of configuration files, and my web config, which obviously we're going to need. And the next thing I'll do is I will open up my app service guy right here, and I'm going to right-click deploy this thing. By the way, I'm going to quote my friend Damien, friends don't let friends right-click deploy. Okay, just remember that. Use your CI/CD stories. Okay. Well, Daryl does, but so I'll right-click my ASP.NET Core guy and say deploy zip package to web app, and that's going to go ahead and zip up my entire ASP.NET publish folder, and it's going to push all that stuff up directly into the cloud for me. Okay, and then I'll just right-click again and do browse website, and you'll see that we've got an ASP.NET Core app running up in a Windows app hosting plan up in the cloud. Okay. Anybody doing any ASP.NET Core yet? Razor apps kind of thing? You liking it? Having fun? Cool. You guys know that ASP.NET Core and the .NET 2.0 Core framework added probably more assembly support than was even in .NET Core 1.0. So they've added all this stuff that we loved and hated, some of us, in the original .NET framework. They've actually brought that forward into .NET Core. You've got a lot more footprint in .NET Core than you had in the past. So as before you had size 8, I got a size 12. Damn it. Nothing's landing with you guys. Or it's all bad. Now I'll right-click this guy and say browse website. And what we should see is a traditional ASP.NET boilerplate site kind of load up here. Any questions up to this point? You getting any? You're not looking anymore.
I have a comment about when you finished with the Cosmos DB, make sure you delete it, or else when you come back to use it, that subscription thing tells you you have no money left in your account.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so ASP.NET deployed from code on a Mac. That's cool, right? Okay. You guys can applaud midstream. You're really doing my ego no favors here. That's okay. Pity applause. That's good. I'll take whatever I can get here. All right. So writing custom scripts in the AZ CLI. Has anybody used AZ CLI yet? You partied on it at all? How many of you, the hands that went up, are you liking the experience? Do you prefer it to PowerShell? Do you prefer it to the old CLI?
Still prefer to PowerShell.
You do. You're kind of a Windows guy.
More confident with PowerShell.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else share that sentiment? Cool. Who doesn't share that sentiment? Who digs AZ CLI? You guys? Awesome. Fists.
Sucked because it didn't support API management.
Didn't they add it?
No, not yet.
Are you,
It's not gonna happen.
are you guys out of RDFE yet? There you go.
They have more even stuff like Azure ML3D.
Pardon me?
Those.
Some
What's
people
that?
were trendy, some people were just really useful.
Yeah.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into code. And one thing that I forgot to show you guys earlier when we were getting started with the acquire is if you go to the marketplace, Visual Studio Com, if you go to the marketplace, you'll see that there's a veritable slew of extensions available for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and you'll see that they've got all these handy categories. Okay, that's super useful that they've added an Azure category that didn't exist before. I had to put it into other. Okay, now that they've added an Azure category, folks like those of us can go out here and you can find all the tools that actually exist. So if you look up here, you might see that there are some tools that I'm not going to show you today. Like I know there are some big data folks in the room. I am not one. I apologize. If you want to use the AC Insight tools, you can actually do some stuff up there.
And will you please take a look at the number next to the word Brady Gaster, the number of downloads on his stuff? Huge.
It's pretty high.
25K?
Yeah, it's pretty high. John's has gotten high too, but
Because it's John.
because it,
And he looks good.
well, because it's John, he looks good, and I took a dependency on him. So everybody gets updated, they get John now, so that's good. One thing that you won't see up on here, and I would have submitted a pull request to them, but they are closed source, is the Azure RM tools my friend Brian Moore and his team wrote, also for Visual Studio. They haven't updated in just a little while. I'm sure that the next time they update, they'll put that Azure category in and then they'll light up in here. Why do I point this out? Because if you start writing an Azure extension, don't you want to show up here? Use that Azure category. See the visibility it will give you? You got Azure right on that front page. Kind of valuable. Okay,
I have like 12 downloads. It would be embarrassing.
you got to market it. Like you marketed your video a couple years ago. Gotcha. All right, now what you'll see here is that I've got to create SQL.azCLI. Okay, that's important because one of the things that they do inside of VS Code is they give you this capability of you can associate certain behaviors and certain type of IntelliSense features with individual file extensions. So you've got AZCLI, VS Code just goes into that mode and knows how to complete things. Before I do that though, let me kind of make a point here. So let me go AZ, oh, what do I do next? Okay, I can hit tab and it's going to give them all to me in a list. I don't like that though. That's not very helpful. I wish it would like autocomplete in line. Okay, like PowerShell. I'm sorry. But I don't have that capability. Wouldn't it be great if I had all that like an IntelliSense file? That'd be super, super sexy. Like what if I could just, what if I could just go AZ and it just gives me everything? You guys like that? And if you go into one of these, like if I go into resources, resource, it will give me the ones that I need to do first. Like all the parameters that are required, it gives them to me in the beginning. It tells me which ones are required. That's money, right? That's like way easier to do it on the command line. So I can actually do all this stuff directly in here. And one thing you'll also notice, again, I'm making a point about conventions, is if I select this guy and the control key is control single quote, I hit control single quote. Oh, is that the right one? Command single quote. So you see, Now what it's going to do is it's going to say we're using the device login, and I'll be doing that in my extension when we get to it. It says to sign in, use a web browser to open this page, yada, 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 and put that code in. So that's a way for us to do what's called device login. So I'll just go ahead and copy this code to my clipboard, and I'm going to hold down the control key, or the command key. For most of you, it would be the control key. And that way it'll give me, the hot link capability. So I'll click that link, zoom back out, and it will show me the device login page, and I can do a control V, and it goes, oh, you're coming to me from the AZ CLI. I'll hit continue. It says, which account do you want? And now I'm logged in. I'm logged into VS Code and the AZ CLI. You see I'm already logged in down here. In a second. Yes?
Won't that only work from a Mac?
No, it works on PC too.
Because
This is VS Code, sir.
but the
Remember,
you're in a
runs everywhere.
You're in a terminal.
It runs everywhere.
AZ CLI doesn't work on
Yeah, but it's a terminal inside. Yeah, but it works.
Because I had to use the bash shell on Windows to get AZ,
You did?
the command line working.
That's interesting. That's kind of weird.
Because you're going to get the regular Windows command prompt there.
Yeah.
On Windows, the AZ CLI.
Well, AZ, if AZ is in your path, it's going to work. If AZ is in your path, you're good. Speaking of which, if you do this, if you install the AZ CLI extension on your machine, no matter what OS it is, and you try to use an AZ command, before I keep talking, I'm going to go ahead right here, and I'm going to select all this stuff and do it again. Control, single quote. I'm going to create a new SQL database. Uh-oh. I got to do this first. Just, would you had your time. I know how to handle this guy. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new Azure SQL database up in the cloud, or a server, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a database. Like, just don't, as you online, I'm going to delete the database so you can't hack into it. I know you can see my password. One thing I will also have to do in here is set the port, or not the port, but set my IP rule so that I can actually get to my database. I may skip the second part of the demo, which is kind of unfortunate. So I want to show you this stuff. So I want to be respectful of time. So while that's running, one thing I want to do, if I were to try to run these commands and I didn't have the AZ CLI installed on my machine and it added to my path, alert window is going to come down from the top of VS Code, and it's going to have a great word in it. It's going to have the word documentation. And when you click it, you're going to go directly out to the doc site, docs.ms.com, CLI Azure. Where you're going to go is directly out to this guy, and you will go right to the install page. They will land you right here. So you can literally just copy the code and run it. Now, one thing I do want to stress is if you're on a Mac, which is like maybe 3 of us in here, if you're on a Mac and you use this approach, there's currently a bug in the code. And what that bug does is for whatever reason, it doesn't automatically know that AZ CLI needs to be handled by the AZ CLI path. I just want to point that out. So what I would recommend if you are on a Mac, just for the meantime, is not to use brew. I hate saying that, it makes me feel dirty. But to use this approach here, to use the curl approach from within bash. That way you know that everything gets wired up, okay? Once that bug is fixed, you can do a brew install. Now, that doesn't mean a whole bunch. I restaged my Mac before I came on this trip, and I tried the AZ CLI and it failed. I got in touch with the team. They said there's a bug, so I did a brew uninstall. I uninstalled AZ CLI, and then I ran this and everything worked. So I do want to point out that you can clearly uninstall it and it'll be okay. This guy's already gone up. Shoot, still creating my database. So I will jump ahead a little bit and then we'll come back to that because there is something that I want to show you, and that's working with SQL Server. But again, I'll come back to that and we'll party on that in a second. Because the other thing that I want to show you is to pivot on some of the stuff that Magnus showed earlier and show you how the tools that I wrote, which is probably going to end up being just this feature once I start stripping everything out. What I want to do is deprecate my entire extension because it was sort of like to get the ball rolling. It was sort of to get in trouble is really what it was for. Like Hanson said, if you're not getting in trouble, you're not doing your job right because you really want to push the envelope a little bit. I got in a little bit of trouble because some of the conventions that I followed were conventions that Brady followed because nobody else had done it yet. Remember the guy walking on the road by himself? okay, now that the teams have gotten together, there's better conventions. So I'm going to rewrite my stuff in TypeScript and use some of those conventions like Azure account and whatnot. But before I finish everything up, what I want to show is if I back up into a folder here, and I think it's 07, the RM folder. I'm going to open this guy up. Now, I also used the same kind of approach to logging in that the Azure CLI team did. So when you're in here, RM, oh, okay, cool. What I'll do is I'll do a Control-Shift-P. I want to just zoom in so you can kind of see this. My zoom is not working consistently. So I'll do Control-Shift-P, and that's going to open up my command palette. This is one of the features that some folks didn't like because it's not very discoverable. I'm going to do an Azure login, and it's going to throw this down. It's going to basically do the same thing that the CLI command does. It shows me the command in the window. But what I'm doing is I'm showing you the code that I just put into your clipboard, and I've got a button that you can click. And when you click the sign in button, it's just going to go ahead and direct you right to the device login page. I've already copied that code into your clipboard. I'm just going to hit paste and then continue on, and we're logged in. And my extension, once you're logged in, it'll actually tell you, hey, you're logged in, I'll pull down your subscriptions. But I really like what the SDK and the VS Code team have done better. Mine was really rough prototype. It's surprising it has so many downloads and so many numbers. It was the only thing out there at the time. But you can see that I've already logged in here. Now what I'll do next is I want to show you this handy website. I cannot remember if Magnus showed this off. Did you show the quick starts?
I showed it on the screen.
You did?
Browsed it.
Okay, cool. This is the quick starts template gallery in GitHub. Okay, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. If I were to scroll through here, you'll see Azure Relay, Backup, Cognitive, Cosmos DB, Data Lake, Functions, the works. API management. Is it in there? Is it in there?
Somebody else did the
It's in there. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, well, you've got everything you could possibly need right here. Okay. Problem is, you'd have to clone the repository down to your computer, find the template that you really want to use, customize the parameters that you want to, make yours, and then you got to go through the process of opening up PowerShell and blah blah blah. Like you got to do all that. Let's make that easy. So I want to use Resource Manager templates to create a brand new web app. I'm not going to I might deploy it just for giggles. But what I'll do here, once again, Control-Shift-P. Now I'm going to type the word search because I know that's what it is. It's going to say search the Azure Resource Manager template quick starts gallery. I'll click that and it says give me a term you want to search. I could do virtual machines here, get back a list of all the VMs, but I'm a web guy, so I'm going to go ahead and type web app and I'll click OK. And here are all the different web apps that I could create in that template, and I'll just type Git because I know that there is a GitHub contained web app that I want to deploy written by His Majesty David Ebo. So I want to go ahead and click this. I say that because the guy's awesome. And see what it did? It went ahead, it created an ARM templates folder. That's a convention that I use. I don't give you the ability to name it. It creates a folder with the name of that template in GitHub, and it brings down the Azure deploy.json and the parameters file. Okay? I love that you showed PowerShell earlier because this is better. Okay. Right, it's lovely. So I'll just say Magnus is Swedish for king, and the hosting plan that I want to create is obviously Magnus is king. So if I wanted to, I could actually go in here to this Azure deploy guy, and I can scroll down. If I wanted to actually change the repo URL, I could go ahead and change that. I could add a repo URL in my parameters file, pointed at something like my blog engine Downer, and then I would deploy Downer to your thing. But Downer takes like an hour to deploy, so we won't do that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and use Dave's MVC 5.2 app. I'm going to do any customization here, and now I'm going to have to open PowerShell to deploy it, right? Like you couldn't possibly have given me the deployment capabilities. You're damn right I did. So I'll type deploy one of these Azure Resource Manager guys out. I'll hit enter. It's going to look through my ARM templates folder. It's going to give me a list of all the ones I want. There's the one I want. I'm going to hit enter. I want to use an existing resource group. I want to go ahead and put it in. I can't put it. I want to create a new resource group. I just had a massive brain fart. I'll create a resource group. I'll call this one Daryl rules. I'll hit enter, and look, it's deploying. So what it's going to do now is it's going to go out, it's going to create a new hosting plan for me. Then it's going to create a brand new web app. Then it's going to reach out to GitHub and it's going to say, hey, he gave me a GitHub URL. I want to pull all the source code from that GitHub URL and deploy all that source code directly into my web app. No, I think I just did that. But if I didn't, it'll error, and you get the point, right? Who likes PowerShell better than this? That's what I thought. Yeah. Magnus won't even put his hand up on that one. All right, so this was my #1 MVP feature. So I think what I'm going to do, since a lot of the other features have been built by the other devs much better than I could have done it, is I'm going to deprecate a lot of the functionality, take dependencies on all those other extensions, and then basically roll this part up as its own extension because it's tight, like really nice. ARM templates are kind of complex, so I want to make it easier for folks. Now this is already going out. Now one other thing that I did, I'll type browse right here, and you see how I've got browse resource group in portal and browse a resource in portal. I'll go ahead and type browse in portal, and now it's going to go out and it's going to give me all the resources I have in my subscription. This can take a while. Okay, just want to point that out. I'll type Daryl. Daryl rules. It's my resource group. Server farms and sites. Click this. It's going to go right to the portal. It's going to go right to that portal blade, and we can actually see that it's being deployed right now from Git. Cool. You guys like that? That fun? Okay. All right. Now the surprise. So up here, I have a particle photon device. It's a tiny little microchip. I feel like Jobs. I have a microcontroller in my hand with a dongle connected to it. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug this in, and I'm going to bounce you out to what that's going to do. Go ahead and open this guy up, photo booth. What that's going to do is it's going to start to light up. You'll see that it'll blink green. It'll go through the green, and my phone's probably sitting over there. Hopefully the hotspot's still turned on. If it doesn't start breathing cyan, then we have a fantastic demo fail here. Because what this is going to do is it's going to use my iPhone because I'm throwing my Wi-Fi signal out. This is going to hop on my Wi-Fi from my iPhone and bounce out through cellular. And we'll probably start to chew up my data pretty quickly here. But we have to wait until it starts to breathe cyan, and then it'll probably work. Maybe. Where's my iPhone?
I'm not seeing it on the network. And I did before.
You did? Crap. Okay. Sorry. Any questions while I'm doing this? Personal hotspot. No, it's on. There it goes. Watch. Boom. Now every time it blinks, it's sending a message up into IoT Hub. There goes one. And what I've done is I've used, oh wait, you don't want to see that. What I've done is I've used the particle integration. So that's a particle photon board. And what Particle's done is they've added this concept of integrations. So I can actually integrate with all kinds of things, such as IoT Hub. Okay? So what I've done is I've gone through and I've added an IoT Hub integration, and then I've written some source code directly in the web-based IDE, and this is what it looks like. Every time it does a ping, it just does a heartbeat, and it sends a mountain of JSON up into the cloud. Now over here in my dashboard, if I go into my CloudBurst guy, you'll see that I have a IoT demo guy right here. And if I click this, and then I go into shared access policies, I think that's where it is, and I go into this policy, I can actually copy out this connection string, and I want to show you how you can install some of these guys if you ever need to. Now see, we've already deployed this app. If I wanted to browse it, I could do so, but we're not going to do that. I want to go ahead and do, I'm going to go over here to my extensions palette, and I don't think I have it installed anymore, so I'll go and I'll do IoT. I'll do Azure IoT Toolkit. I'll do an install. It was very deliberate because I wanted you guys to see just how complicated it is to install VS Code extensions if you've never done it. Now, my thing is still pinging here. So what I want to do is go down here to IoT devices. And I want to click this guy. Start monitoring D2C, device to cloud messages. If I go up here, it says, give me what you want. Give me your, Damn it. Let me zoom back out. Sorry. Start monitoring D2C messages. I'll paste in my connection string right here. I'll hit enter. You'll see that it's going to start monitoring my IoT hub. Let me open this up. You'll see here. See that blue light flash? And then immediately after it flashes, we'll see a message coming. That's hot. That's pretty cool. All right, so that's the end of that. One thing that I wanted to show you is that you could actually use the SQL extension. Anybody ever use the SQL tools from within VS? You can query SQL Server and see all the grids and everything. You can actually do that from within VS Code. I'm not going to show that today. I could, if you want, get in touch with me over Twitter. Say what?
It's fast inside code.
What?
Visual Studio it's not too performant every now and
This one's pretty fast. This is pretty fast. Who's after me? Can I cut in 5 minutes? Anybody mind? Can I go 5? Can I go 5 long?
outside. I don't know.
Okay. I'll keep going then, because I have to set the freaking firewall port and all that jazz. All right, so I'm in here. I'll back out. SQL code up. Going to this guy. Azure CLI. That's not what I wanted. So freaking A, man. Code. Sorry. SQL. Don't save it. Oh, that was actually an accident. There. Sorry, fat fingering everything. So I've gone ahead and created the SQL Server database up in the cloud. Let me disconnect this thing. I'll chew up my resources. Go ahead and do this, and now I'll go ahead. I have to log in one more time. This might not work. Copy this out. Log in. Sorry. Maybe. It is pretty quick. So what I'll do here, this may not let me do it until I open up the firewall. Let me try. If it doesn't, I'll just bail. So this is actually me creating a database inside of that SQL Server that I just created. See that it's running down here. While that's running, I'm going to go ahead and flip out to the deck, because I do want to point out a couple other things real quick that I feel you need to see. And that is not what I meant to do. Darn it. Build your own extensions. All right. I want to talk about building your own. Okay, contributions are great because that's why open source is fantastic. You know, the products are only as great as the contributions that we get. And I want you guys to start contributing some Azure extensions because everybody needs one. Okay, if you've got a service you like to use and there's not an extension for it, no reason why you shouldn't build it. So the first thing is there's an Azure Extension SDK. I'll pop out to this particular repo here in a second. The SDK kind of consists of a README file, but it also directs you to the Azure Account extension, which is the only extension you would need to take a dependency on in your extension. You have to depend on code, obviously, and all that stuff. But you would depend on the Azure Account extension, and it gives you all the login capabilities. And this is the best part, token persistence and secure persistence capabilities. Writing that yourself, not recommended. It'll also keep your functionality simple and concise. Like we talked about earlier, the extension that I wrote was far too large. It handled batch, app service, key vault, yada, yada, yada. So what we're going to do is we're going to split those up. Eventually, I want to talk to Christos about having him split those out. And again, we want to write everything in TypeScript because that's kind of the convention. Make sure you label it as an Azure extension so it shows up on that page. That's hugely important. I'll click those links real quick just to show you the stuff. Now, if you take a quick peek at this page here, like if I open it, is it opening? Yeah, there it is. This is really what this extension does. It says SDK in quotes and everything, is it really walks you through everything that you would need to do. Some of it actually talks about, you know, things you want to do. Oh shoot, you can't see it. Sorry. Sorry about that. I won't go into the slide next. I'll just scroll to it. This will really show you all the different, it's got a nice table of contents. It walks through everything. It shows you like how you would contribute stuff into the Explorer. It shows you some best practices on using commands if you want to add commands, which is the stuff that pops down from that command palette, which is really all my extension was. Not recommended. It's kind of hard to find. It talks about Azure account, and it literally says you want to take a dependency on this in your extension dependencies guy, and then you want to use this code, and this code helps you log in. Trust me, this is so much better. I had to work directly with the Azure Node SDK team, and they had to push a release for me to be able to do that. Now, we've made it so much easier now. It's going to be great for you guys to party on it. So I do want to point that out. You know, when you're accessing, you know, when you're doing things like looking at file paths, don't use / hard-coded in your thing because it won't work on my machine. Okay, you want to use OS, you know, conformant things. You don't want to target a particular OS, or only people on that OS are going to be able to use it, and you'll get bugs, bug reports. If you want to send telemetry, this is fantastic. The VS Code team is giving you their telemetry key. The reason they're doing that is they want all these extensions to have centralized telemetry so that they can see how all these extensions are working across an entire ecosystem. Otherwise, you'd have to pay for your own App Insights instance and you'd have to send data to it. Hats off, VS Code team. Good idea. They even give you a reporter class for you to just drop in and call. Makes life a lot easier. And they go through and they give you links to other extensions so you can see how people have built it before. And then you want to create a publisher. And the publisher is really just so you can do this. You can actually publish your stuff into the marketplace. This is it. If I wanted to push an update to it, I would actually just right click and I could view the reports. If I wanted to push another one, I could do update and just update my v6. And then you can go from there. And I just want to point out, you know, they give you good guidance in the VS Code extension documentation on how to write your extensions, and they talk about the different extension packs and whatnot for Azure so that they really target the Azure ecosystem better. Next steps, we talked about some of these. Azure Tools 2.0, I'm going to rewrite it in TypeScript and strip a bunch of stuff out. Azure CLI, it would be really great if they started using an Azure account too, so you don't have to do that command line thing anymore. That'd be pretty nice. Calls to action for you guys. Try these extensions and see how they work. And when you find ways that they could be better, when you find opportunities, not bugs, you want to submit issues and make sure that they're getting pushed. Or better, you want to submit contributions. Okay, that's the best way. When you're ready, submit pull requests, build your own extensions, and when you do, our docs are also open source. Submit a pull request for a new document written in Markdown to docs.ms.com so folks like Daryl know how to use your extension, okay? Because we need documentation. It's very important stuff. And most importantly, I want to thank you guys. I'm going to flip back over to the SQL here in a second. I want to thank you. It's been great to spend an hour with you. Happy coding, all that goodness. Now you see here that we've gone ahead and created that database. Now I'll flip over to this instance of code. See if I can log into this database. I'm going to do Control-Shift-P, and you'll see I'll just type SQL here, and it says, do you want to connect, disconnect, whatever. I'm going to say connect, and it's probably going to bark at me, you don't have a SQL file open, so I'll close this. And I want to open up this SQL file, and you can see when I'm writing this stuff is at night when I'm watching my late night shows. Control-Shift-P, connect, MS SQL. I'm going to create a connection profile. Dang it, that's going to take forever, and I'll have to open the firewall port. What I'd be able to do here if I don't want to take any more time, I've gone like 7 over, is I could go out, I could open up a firewall port, and then I can connect to my SQL server and run SQL commands in it, and you will actually see a grid open up right here. If anybody wants to see that, we can talk about it afterwards. I just want to make sure people get time to present. Do you have a question?
See the picture in Twitter.
I can show you a picture. It'd be great. Just look for MS SQL in the extension gallery. There's tons of good. I'll just show you, for crying out loud. Can you tell I'm excited about VS Code? Love this product. Where is it? SQL. SQL. There we go. They've got animated GIFs. You can see right here. See what's happening is they're actually executing a command. They're doing a select statement. When they do a select statement, then they execute it. Say execute query, and boom. See what happened there? kind of quick, but you can see all the results directly. That's all I'm going to do. It's like the same code.
Can I go against a local SQL?
Yeah, totally. You can totally go against a local SQL. Great question. Cool. Any other questions? Sorry to go over. Whoever's speaking next, I apologize. Cool. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot.